You, and it's also a little bit mind-blowing that this is our second to last session in our current resilience series. So we appreciate you guys who've come along with us for this ride, and we're excited for today's presentation. So if you guys could please put your name, position, organization, and email either in the Menti chat. You can access Mentimeter by going to menti.com and use the code 347-4205, and that will allow you to submit anonymous answers and questions that will be addressed at the end of the presentation. If you do have access to your Zoom keyboard or Zoom chat, feel free to enter your information there. This is to help us with our attendance records for our funding agency, and then we also follow up with additional resources after each session. So we'll go ahead and get started today, just so we can make sure that we stay on time. Oh, sorry, I gotta pull up my Menti note. Here we go. So we'll go ahead and start with some introductions. I am Krista Opsedal. I am the project director for Project ECHO at the North Dakota Center for Persons with Disabilities. And prior to my role here at the center, I was a DSP for 4 years. So Jessica, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jessica Reiswig. I work at NDCPD at Minot State University. I work on the Impact Project and also the ASTEP project as the mentor coordinator.
Thank you. Jody.
Hi, I'm Jody Patchen. I'm also on Project ECHO, and I'm the administrative assistant at NDCPD.
And Kyle.
I'm Kyle Erickson. I work at NDCPD, and I'm with the Project ECHO here.
Thank you. And we also have Jen Hall-Landy on our team. She's going to be a little bit late today, but she is from the University of Minnesota, from the Institute of Community Living. And then we also have Linda Anderson, who is our speaker for today. So Dr. Anderson has her PhD in rehabilitative science at the University of Minnesota, focusing on health disparities for individuals with ASD and IDD. She also has an MPH in community health. Her professional expertise stems from work in the field as a county senior social worker, coordinating supports for adults and children with ASD and IDD, and also as a program director for residential supports for this population. In these roles, she was able to see firsthand the challenges individuals with ASD and IDD and their families face in getting appropriate quality health care. Her research experience has included analysis of large data sets, such as the National Health Interview Survey, along with population-specific data, such as the National Core Indicators Family Surveys. Dr. Anderson has also experience in qualitative research methods that promote the inclusion of underrepresented groups in research, such as photonarrative. So please help me in welcoming Ms. Linda Anderson.
I think I sent you the wrong file. That one was for a research project that we just submitted. I had too many things going on. Multitasking is never effective. Like Krista said, I do have my PhD in public health, PhD in rehabilitation science, and in a master's of public health in community health. And as part of my PhD, I really focused on wellness for people with intellectual disabilities. And so my dissertation was really fun. I'm just talking about it for a minute because it is relevant. And so I had people take pictures of things that made them feel happy and healthy. And and as you might expect, things like exercising and eating all the broccoli is not what people took pictures of. People took pictures of things that were meaningful to them and their relationships and the places where they felt connected to the community more than they took pictures of those other things. And so from that project, I've done some other things. We developed a wellness curriculum for adults with intellectual disabilities that they did in partnership with either a family member or a DSP or a peer. And this work that I've done with people with intellectual disabilities has sort of moved into also teaching wellness and things for people who work in the direct support workforce. So I was a direct support worker for quite a few years. And so I understand the stress, and it's probably worse now with the workforce shortage, which is definitely worse than when I worked in the field and direct supports. So what I really going to do is we're talk a little bit about the biology and stuff and theory behind stress and stress management. But really for a lot of this next half hour, I'm going to talk about practical things that we can all do to manage our stress that we can do like in a minute. I'm not going to talk about meditation or anything like that. If you love meditation and it works for you, do it. I'm talking about things that we can do in 30 seconds in a minute. So to kind of bring the stress down and doing those things throughout the day when we're feeling stressed is really helpful. But we're going to start with just a really simple exercise, and these is a grounding technique, and it's just a way of bringing ourselves back to the present and calming down for a minute. And it's really, really quick. This is one of those things that's very simple that you could teach the people you support. Another one is think of a color and then identify all of the things of that color that you see around you is another example of something like this. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about today are things that we can teach the folks we support. And if you practice them when everybody's calm and in a great mood, it's easy to remember to do them when we're not calm and feeling stressed out. Sometimes it's hard to remember these when we're in the moment of being stressed. So what I would like you to do is just get comfortable. Close your eyes or not as it works for you. And just, I want you to take a couple deep breaths in and out, kind of breath that fills your belly. And just 2 or 3 of those, and then we'll go from there. Think about 5 things that you can see. 4 things that you can feel. 3 things that you can hear. 2 things that you can smell. And 1 thing that you can taste. And then take 2 more nice deep breaths. All right, do you want to go to the next slide, Krista? That was just a really simple exercise that can help reduce stress in the moment. All right, the next slide. So just a little bit about some of the things that from research and personal experience and talking to DSPs that really contribute to the feelings of stress, compassion fatigue, and having, and in that, both of which lead to burnout is often DSPs experience a lack of control in their workplace. Sometimes job expectations are unclear. There's extremes of activity, so there may be times where people don't have a lot going on, and then they'll be really, really hectic, or they could be very physical, or if you support people who may have high needs for behavioral supports that may happen periodically, where people that need that level of a high level of support, and then there's you don't know when it's going to happen, and so your work life is unpredictable. Often, particularly for people who work in community settings or in self-directed supports, there's a lack of social support at work. There's not a team or colleagues to work with. And then particularly, I think since the pandemic, is work-life balance is really, really hard. And we know this from surveys we've been conducting over the past 2 years with direct support workers, is that people are being expected to, if they're working environments where people can mandate shifts, having shifts mandated, or just feeling a lot of pressure to pick up extra shifts, work in settings and with people that they may not be familiar with, having just not a lot of time to take care of yourself. And so these are all things that contribute to stress, and it's a natural outcome for some of the thing for DSPs to experience stress in these situations, and also frontline supervisors who are often having to step into DSP roles in addition to providing, making sure their own work gets done. And so what we're going to do today is to just maybe give yourself some grace to take a step back. And we're going to talk about a few ways to just sort of manage stress in the moment. None of them are magical that going to make the stress go away, but if we can help for a few minutes to recollect yourself, then it's hopefully useful. We're going to start with a video. Go ahead, Kristen, play the video about what chronic stress does to our brains and then ultimately to our bodies. I'm going to show that.
Are you sleeping restlessly, feeling irritable or moody, forgetting little things, and feeling overwhelmed and isolated? Don't worry, we've all been there. You're probably just stressed out. Stress isn't always a bad thing. It can be handy for a burst of extra energy and focus, like when you're playing a competitive sport or have to speak in public. But when it's continuous, the kind most of us face day in and day out, it actually begins to change your brain. Chronic stress, like being overworked or having arguments at home, can affect brain size, its structure, and how it functions, right down to the level of your genes. Stress begins with something called the hypothalamus-pituitary-adrenal axis, a series of interactions between endocrine glands in the brain and on the kidney, which controls your body's reaction to stress. When your brain detects a stressful situation, your HPA axis is instantly activated and releases a hormone called cortisol, which primes your body for instant action. But high levels of cortisol over long periods of time wreak havoc on your brain. For example, chronic stress increases the activity level and number of neural connections in the amygdala, your brain's fear center. And as levels of cortisol rise, electric signals in your hippocampus, the part of the brain associated with learning, memories, and stress control, deteriorate. The hippocampus also inhibits the activity of the HPA axis, so when it weakens, so does your ability to control your stress. That's not all though. Cortisol can literally cause your brain to shrink in size. Too much of it results in the loss of synaptic connections between neurons and the shrinking of your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that regulates behaviors like concentration, decision-making, judgment, and social interaction. It also leads to fewer new brain cells being made in the hippocampus. This means chronic stress might make it harder for you to learn and remember things, and also set the stage for more serious mental problems like depression and eventually Alzheimer's disease. The effects of stress may filter right down to your brain's DNA. An experiment showed that the amount of nurturing a mother rat provides its newborn baby plays a part in determining how that baby responds to stress later in life. The pups of nurturing moms turned out less sensitive to stress because their brains developed more cortisol receptors, which stick to cortisol and dampen the stress response. The pups of negligent moms had the opposite outcome, and so became more sensitive to stress throughout life. These are considered epigenetic changes, meaning that they affect which genes are expressed without directly changing the genetic code. And these changes can be reversed if the moms are swapped. But there's a surprising result. The epigenetic changes caused by one single mother rat were passed down to many generations of rats after her. In other words, the results of these actions were inheritable. It's not all bad news though. There are many ways to reverse what cortisol does to your stressed brain. The most powerful weapons are exercise and meditation, which involves breathing deeply and being aware and focused on your surroundings. Both of these activities decrease your stress and increase the size of the hippocampus, thereby improving your memory. So don't feel defeated by the pressures of daily life. Get in control of your stress before it takes control of you.
I always wonder, like, these videos just add to your stress, right? Like the last thing you need when you're feeling stress is to find out how bad stress is for you. One of the things that, I mean, I think when you watch that video, it probably rings some bells if you're really stressed. I mean, this is what I do when I'm really stressed. I don't sleep very well, but also I'll find my keys in the freezer kind of things that forget really stupid things. And so it does affect our brain. And I think anybody who's been really stressed out can notice that our executive functioning just doesn't work as well when we're under a lot of stress. One of the things that this video doesn't talk about that I want to mention before we go on, because some of the things we're going to do later directly play into this, is that we have a nerve that starts in our brain, a cranial nerve called the vagus nerve, and it goes all the way down to our stomach, and it's kind of it's the longest nerve that we have, and it sort of connects all those things, and it operates our parasympathetic nervous system. So we have two nervous systems, if you remember this from high school biology or whatever. And so the sympathetic nervous system is they call the fight and flight. So when we get ramped up and we freeze or we run away, and that's when our heart rate goes faster, things like that when we're under stress. But the parasympathetic nervous system is the counterbalance to that, and sometimes that's called the rest and digest nervous system. So it's it's the counterbalance to the sympathetic nervous system, and the idea is to keep them in balance. Like we don't want too much of one or the other. And so the vagus nerve can affect our parasympathetic nervous system. So some of the activities we're going to do, like repetitive exercise, like walking or mindful breathing, things like that, support the parasympathetic nervous system and get that engaged, and that sort of calms down the fight and flight part of our nervous system. And the other thing that's really fascinating is they're doing lots of research related to our guts and our microbiome, and all the microbes that live in our gut affects our brain health, because it's sort of a communication system that goes between our stomach and our brain, and so our stomach sort of called our second brain. And so eating a diet that supports a healthy gut microbiome, so lots of fiber and fruits and vegetables and probiotics like yogurt and things like that, beans, actually supports our mental health too. And so it's all connected, and it's just super fascinating research. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So stress is perceived. It doesn't mean it's not real and we're not experience it, but everybody experiences stress differently, and it's how we perceive it, and then what we do with it. And so the same situation may bother somebody very, very little and may cause another person an extreme level of stress. And so that's important to remember, that we're all react to and manage these things differently, but there are things that we can learn to do that will help manage stress. So if we're somebody who tends to get more anxious and experiences stress more, doesn't mean we're destined to always feel stressed out, that we can learn things and skills that will help. And so this is a great quote from Lena Horne. It's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way you carry it. And so it's the way that you approach the things that are stressing you out is really important. And that's what we're going to talk about next a little bit. Go to the next slide. So I just want you to take a minute and think about these questions and how you might manage stress now. Think about what fulfills you. What are the things that happen in your life that make you feel good, make you feel content, that calm you down? And then think about the things that take away your sense of peace and contentment and not being stressed out, what depletes you. And then just think about, are there things that you could do that you're not doing that would leave something in reserve? Because to be resilient, we need to leave something in reserve. If we're constantly drained dry, it's really hard to be a resilient person. So I'll just give you a minute to think about that. If you want to put your answers in chat or Mentimeter, feel free. Don't feel obligated if you're not comfortable with that, but it would be good to see what other people are thinking, is it may give you an idea. Rebecca needs to say no more often. That's really hard to do. That's probably a lot of us would benefit from strengthening that skill. Nancy, that's a great, and actually in this training, I have the 2-hour version of this training that I do with the direct support workers in Minnesota who are employed through self-directed programs. And I have a slide about that exact thing, Nancy, about there's only certain things we can control and the rest we can't. And so we need to not spend a lot of energy on the things we can't do anything about. I didn't include it in this one, but that's a really good point. Jen's challenges are working too much. It's really easy to do that for sure. All right, so if you want to go to the next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about mindfulness. Mindfulness is a training to support living in the present. And so it's living with intention. It's making choices about how we choose to think about things, about where we put our energy, about how we respond to a situation. And it's about paying attention to what's going on around us. It's a really effective way that research shows of addressing stress and preventing burnout. Being mindful means that we accept our thoughts without judgment, and it's okay to be sad and angry and resentful. And so having those emotions is reasonable and part of the human experience. And sort of the always be happy kind of toxic positivity things I don't think are helpful. But staying in that frame of mind where we're always sad or angry or resentful or feeling bad all the time isn't also good for long-term health. So it's good to acknowledge those feelings. They're real feelings that we all have, and it's okay to feel that way. And then what are we going to do about it is the next step. So mindfulness is really working on staying in the moment and not allowing our thoughts to race into the future, dwell on the past. And I don't know how many of you are like me, like when I go to bed at night, I relive every bad thing, well, not bad, but stupid thing I've ever said or done, like going back to, probably 5th grade. And so that's not a healthy way to use our brain energy and to spend our time. And so mindfulness can help with those kinds of things. Being mindful can help us feel calmer by focusing on breath and other body sensations, which we'll get to in a minute. And it can quiet kind of that wheel that spins in our head. All right, go to the next slide. So there's a lot of research about mindfulness. Some of it's really, really interesting. Some of it's related to mindfulness activities other than meditation. And there's also a huge body of research related to meditation itself. They have done studies with Buddhist monks who are Olympic level meditators and looked at how that affects the brain. And it's really, really fascinating research. Being mindful reduces stress, and it can enhance our working memory. Because in that video, it talked about how our memory, after experiencing long-term chronic stress, the parts of our brain that manage our memory can be impacted. And so being mindful and practicing mindfulness practices can help our memory. It can help us manage our emotions. It can help us be more present and less distracted. It actually also has some physical benefits. So people who experience chronic pain can benefit from mindful practices, and it can do things like lower our blood pressure. So there's a lot of physical benefits from doing some of these practices too. Our brains and our bodies aren't separated, they affect each other. And so taking care of one helps us take care of the other. Okay, next slide. And so these are just some mindful practices that have been shown to work. And so for some people really like visualization. My sister, when she's feeling stressed out, really loves Florida. So she goes on a mental vacation to Florida for a few minutes, and that helps her. If you do this while breathing, I'm going to talk about breathing in the next one, but just spend some time visiting your favorite place. Or the things that make you happy, even for a minute, can be helpful. Breathing is a really, really, really useful tool for the primary reason is that when we do like really deep breathing, that's slow, and is rhythmic. So like, for example, there's a kind of breathing called box breathing where you breathe in for 4, you hold it for 4, you breathe out for 4, and then you hold it for 4. calms down our vagus nerve, then our parasympathetic and enhances our parasympathetic nervous system. Or if you breathe in for 6 and breathe out for 8, there's all kinds of different ways of breathing. Or sometimes even just counting your breath like 1 to 10 and repeating and breathing deeply. It's got to be that kind of breathing that fills our diaphragm and our stomach, and not like the shallow shoulder breathing. Can all help because it triggers our vagus nerve. It also then calms down our heart rate. And so if your heart is racing, if you slow down your breath, your heart will automatically slow down. And so breathing is a super important part of this. And so one of the things that to teach, for example, if you want to teach children or people you support who may have a hard time with the figuring out the breathing thing, is what we did with the wellness classes that I used to have is we would blow bubbles, because the kind of breathing that it takes to successfully blow a bubble is the kind of breathing you need to do when to calm down, or laying on having somebody lay on their back and put like a pillow or a stuffed animal or something on their stomach, and the idea is to make the thing on their stomach go up and down. That's another way to teach it. Or blowing a balloon. Those are all ways of teaching like that kind of breathing you need to do to get that parasympathetic nervous system to respond. Exercise is a great way, particularly, well, any exercise you like that makes you feel good is a stress reducer. But in terms of mindfulness and affecting cortisol levels in our stress response, exercise that is repetitive, so walking, running, the things where it's the same motion over and over and over again are particularly useful for that. There's meditative walking where you just walk really, really slowly and you sort of feel your feet on the ground and you pay attention to everything that's in the environment around you. Can be helpful for people. For some people, their faith is an important part of their lives, and prayer is a mindfulness practice. I mean, it's a way of focusing our brain on something and serve the same purpose as other activities. Logic is really helpful if we're feeling stressed out. Triggering the logic part of our brain can be really helpful in managing stress. And so doing crossword puzzles or brain games or Sudoku, things like that, interrupt our negative thinking patterns and our racing mind. And then when we sort of trigger that logical part of our brain, it can help us problem solve better. Journaling can be helpful. So just spending time, particularly at night, maybe if you go to bed and just dumping everything on a piece of paper can be really useful. Gratitude journaling can be helpful. So writing down every day something that you're grateful for the day. The interesting thing about gratitude journaling is some studies show that you should do it every day. You should do like most days of the week, but if you do it every day, it loses its effectiveness, which I think was a fascinating thing. And then being creative. So being creative can also help us reduce our stress levels. And so making music, art, scrapbooking, or anything else that's creative, and where we can get to that flow where we're really focused on this creative activity that we're doing, and our brain gets into a flow with that. And it also helps reduce stress levels. The idea with that is, if you're not great at it, don't worry about it. I learned how to paint during the pandemic. I am a horrible painter, but I love it. And so I don't worry about whether it's going to hang in the Minneapolis Institute of Arts. I just do it because it makes me happy. And so find something like that just brings you joy. And don't worry about anything else. It makes you happy. That's all that's important. I think over the past few years, the other thing you've seen probably is like adult coloring books, where they're very complicated pictures and you color those in. Kind of the same thing. We kind of get into like repetitive movement, and you can be really creative. And you kind of get in the flow, and you're focused on that. Is another way of simple tool of reducing stress. Okay, next slide. So some of us don't like to be still, and mindfulness can also work when we're being active. So like I mentioned, mindfulness, walking a little bit earlier. So you're really being really observant about what you're seeing and hearing and smelling in your environment. And it's, to do that, you have to really slow down. And so it's probably not your exercise walk. It's you're really walking for your brain. There's he's passed away, but a Vietnamese Buddhist monk who talks about dishwashing as a mindfulness practice. And so the Buddhist monks will treat all their chores with great importance and spend a lot of time doing them slowly and carefully and focusing on them and not thinking about anything else. And so I picked dishwashing as one of these activities because for me, this is a mindfulness activity. And it is for me, and I wash dishes by hand, even though I have a dishwasher, because it's like the warm sudsy water and it's repetitive movement. And I can focus on breathing and I don't have to think about anything else. I can just focus on getting the dishes, but this can be done with really any mundane daily task that you might do. You can make showering a mindful activity or weeding the garden. I know a lot of people weeding the garden. They love to do it because it's one of the things they can focus on that and they don't have to think about anything else. And it's just a repetitive movement and activity that just calms them down quite a bit. The whole point is to sit down or slow down and focus on the task and the sights and the touch and the smell and how our body is moving as we do it. And then really think about that. You can skip to the next slide. I guess I had creative things on both. I'm just going to talk, we're going to talk about a couple other mindfulness activities, and then I'm going to talk about some apps that can be really helpful. One of the really helpful way if we're not feeling great or feeling stressed out or feeling anxious is something called STOP. It's a body scan. And so if you just take a minute, and it really does take more than a minute, is to stop what you're doing, take a breath and concentrate on your breath flowing in and out. Think about how you're feeling. Are you hungry? Are you feeling a particular way? What emotions do you have? What's your posture? Do you have aches and pains? And then think about something that you could do that you could address whatever's causing the discomfort or the stress. And so it could be it's time to eat something, or you need to stand up and take a stretch, or it's time to take a 5-minute walk or talk to somebody. And so it's really easy really easy way to tune into our bodies and figure out what's causing our discomfort. All right, and then the next one, breathing. And I've talked about this a little bit about this already. Really paying attention to our breath is important, and it really does help calm everything down in terms of our parasympathetic nervous system. And so just paying attention. I know some people, when they're feeling stressed out, kind of stop breathing or be really shallow, and aren't getting those really good deep breaths in that help get the oxygen going through our body. And so just paying attention to make sure you're breathing sounds weird, but just think about it. If you're feeling stressed out, see if you can catch yourself like, oh, I'm holding my breath again. A lot of people do that. I'm counting breaths, just counting in and out up to 1 to 10, and then starting over if you need to. Another breathing technique, which I didn't mention before, is the 4-7-8 breathing technique, and that's sort of more like a triangle, I suppose. So breathe in for 4, hold for 7, breathe out for 8. And then box breathing I mentioned earlier, which could help us with focusing, which is the 4 counts of breathing in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. Oh my gosh, it's already 1:35. This goes so fast, Krista. I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple apps, which can be really helpful, including my favorite one. And I'll make sure that when you get this, the links for some of these apps are in the last slide. So there are a lot of apps that you can put on your phone that can help you focus on self-care and mindfulness and well-being. And these are some of them. So for example, Breathe to Relax is just a breathing guided tool. Insight Timer has guided meditations if you're into that sort of thing. It has music and has other tools. Headspace teaches you how to meditate if that's something you want to learn how to do. If insomnia is a problem for you, Headspace has some episodes on how to deal with sleeplessness on Netflix. And I think they're 10 or 15 minutes, and you can kind of watch them before you go to bed and try their techniques and see if that helps. Journey is a journaling app. So if you want to journal, but you don't really know like where to start or what to do, maybe this would be helpful. It gives you prompts about things to write about. And then I want to talk a little bit about the virtual hope box, which is become something that I suggest to everybody. It's a really interesting app. It has research behind it that shows that it works. And so it was originally developed by the Defense Department to support vets and their families when the vets had PTSD or other mental health issues stemming from their service. And so it takes into account all of the things that we need, that we talked about here to break a cycle of negative thoughts. And so it has relaxation exercises. It has a place where you can put inspirational quotes. It has guided meditations and breathing exercises. It has a section of logic puzzles, so like Sudokus and word searches and things like that. But it also has some places where you can put things in there that are meaningful to you. So you can make coping cards, for example, so you can remind yourself that when I'm feeling this way, I'm going to do this to feel better. When I'm feeling anxious, these are the things that help me. And then it also has a place to put in photos and videos and music of your own that can, if there are things that make you feel less stressed and make you feel calmer, then you have access to that. It's sort of all on your phone. It's free, and it works. It's a very utilitarian. It's not a super fancy bells and whistles kind of app, but it works, and it's pretty straightforward to use. And if you have folks you support who use smartphones, it might be a great tool for them too, because it is pretty easy to use. It's pretty straightforward. All right, and I just want to talk about one more. Go to the next slide. That's a little bit less related. It is related to mindfulness, but it's also a stress reducer. And this is some areas where the new research is happening in terms of our brain and keeping our brain healthy and managing stress. And it's the science of awe, 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 like when we feel awe. And so one of the main people researching this is a psychologist named Dr. Keltner, or Dotcher maybe. I don't know how to say his first name. And so the feeling of being, and awe is the feeling of being in the presence of something vast or beyond human scale that transcends our current understanding of things. And I picked this particular picture, which is really fuzzy. It didn't translate very well to the big slide, but it's, it's somebody who's standing out looking at the Milky Way. And so, if you had the chance to be out of an urban area and see the Milky Way in all its glory, it's pretty spectacular. And so awe helps us see things in new ways. It can put the brakes on our fight or flight response. It kind of helps us stop and think, and can make us more receptive to details and new information. Some of the research is showing that sort of experiencing moments of awe can make us feel happier. And it releases, reduces levels of cytokines, which are things that make in our body that make increased inflammation, and which can cause pain and illness and things like that. And so we all experience awe. It's one of those things in different ways. And so nature does it for me. Everything from seeing a butterfly to the northern lights. I mean, that's what does it for me. Appreciating other people's accomplishments, music, art, religious experiences, moral beauty, virtue, beauty. We all have different ways of experiencing it, and it's good to figure out what works for you. And it's really interesting. It's a newer thing, but I think it's something that we can find for ourselves that will help us feel better in the long run. And the last slide, hopefully that leaves enough time for the questions and the case study. So these are just some resources that I find useful for this. Greater Good in Action is a center at Berkeley, UCLA, that focuses on research related to positive psychology. So how to manage stress, how to avoid burnout. They're doing the AWE research. They have research related to workplace things. That's a really, really, really great resource. And they have a lot of researchers who cover different areas. And so there's probably something there that will work for you if you're interested in this kind of thing. I really encourage you to check it out. One of the things that they have is you can add they have a monthly calendar, which you can, like, if you use Google Calendar, and I'm sure other calendars, you can add it. And so every day it gives you a nice suggestion, like, try this today and see, and see how it makes you feel. And for some things, I'm not interested, and so I just skip it. But sometimes it's nice to have that little reminder there at the beginning of the day to think about self-care and making sure that I'm managing my stress. Another place, if you're interested in journaling, is there's this website, which is about mindful journaling. And again, it gives you prompts on how to do it. SAMHSA has a whole section on mental health support, which is really, really helpful. And then I have the link there that takes you to the virtual quote box, which is you can get it right from your app, and it's on Android and Apple, but this talks a little bit more about it if you want more details. All right, does anybody have any questions or thoughts or comments or experiences, things that they do to help them feel calmer and to manage their stress? This was a real challenge for me because this is a 2-hour training that I do, and to cram it all down into 30 minutes was
I've
hard.
never heard of this awe. What was it called again? Awe.
The Science of Awe.
Okay.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
It's so funny because I've experienced that a handful of times, but
Yeah.
never realized what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
Like I even made a joke at the end that I felt like I had a flood of dopamine in my brain. So it's really funny that there is actual research.
It's really fascinating. Fascinating.
Yeah.
So reading his book in a mostly quiet environment. Yeah, reading, and I think I'm a reader too, and that's my go. Get out of my messy life. Go to is reading a good book, for sure.
Awesome. Well, feel free to keep adding what helps you in the comments.
Yeah.
I did reach out to Joy to ask her about this really cool walking app that she was doing for a while there that I actually got into and then forgot about it until right now. And so I'm hoping I have a new hobby at the end of this. So yeah, please feel free to keep adding that into the chat, and we'll address that towards the end of our presentation. We're going to go into our case presentation now. So the purpose of the resilience case presentations is to share people's stories of lived experience to help destigmatize talking about mental health, see some examples of the content that we're talking about in action, and help create a safe environment for people to ask questions. So we just wanted to give a trigger warning. This presentation does contain some emotionally triggering topics around mental health crisis. If you feel uncomfortable, please feel free to log off, and we will provide a recording at the end of the session if that's easier for you to access. And please note that 988 has been designated as the new 3-digit dialing code. You can call and text this line, and it's available throughout the United States. So we're going to introduce our case presenter, Kyle Erickson, who is somebody you may be familiar with. Kyle is a research associate at North Dakota Center for Persons with Disabilities and also a stand-up comedian. Today, he's going to talk about how his inability to handle stress and stay mindful sent his life into a tailspin this past summer. And he's going to talk about the steps that he's taking to ensure that it never happens again. So Kyle, go ahead and take over.
First of all, can everyone hear me okay? Great. If I need to stop, just let me know. My audio decided not to stop working on my computer like last night. So yeah, Linda talked about what happened with like mindfulness and just handling stress. I'm gonna tell you what happens when you don't follow those steps and what happens to you. So, Krista was saying, I am a stand-up comedian. I've been performing for about 2 years now. And in the summer of 2021, I made the decision to move from my small town in North Dakota, Minot, and I was gonna move to the Twin Cities to pursue, a career in stand-up. Problem was I couldn't just move. I had to put myself, I didn't have a job at that point, and I use a wheelchair to get around. So I needed to put myself on all these wait lists so that I could find a place to live. Problem was that all these wait lists are like super long, as I'm sure some of you in the care provider community know. Also to make things worse, I was on some pretty heavy antidepressants at the time, which isn't surprising. I'm a millennial. I think at this point in time, everybody under the age of 40 is on some form of antidepressants. Well, since my life was going so well, and I had a vision and goals and stuff, I decided to just stop taking them cold turkey. Apparently that's not a good idea, but I didn't find that out too much later. Like I said, this wait list I put myself on took a really long time for me to get to the top of. In the meantime, I put my whole life on hold because I had no idea when this move was gonna happen. It could be in 2 weeks or it could be in like 2 years, I thought. So I stopped dating. I was looking for work at that point in time. I stopped looking for work in the area. I stopped building relationships with friends, even just because I thought, well, if you're gonna move, you don't know what's the point. And then I started stressing myself out about okay, because the move was taking so long, and I was just worried about a lot of things that I had no control over. And then I got to the point where, okay, once I actually move, oh my God, how am I gonna, the bus system and how am I gonna find work and all this other things. So I started stressing myself out about that. So unfortunately, what happened is, by the time an appointment did come up, I was a mess. I dug myself in such a hole. My mental health was in the toilet, so to speak, and I even found a job in the city that I would even have an income once I got there. So I wouldn't have to rely on just my stand-up stuff, but I was in no frame of mind to go down there and try essentially a whole different world. Against my better judgment, I decided to move anyway. I lasted about 2 weeks. Luckily, I had some really good people on the North Dakota side. They care about me, and they're like, "You need to come back home, and just get back home so people that care about you can help you heal a bit." Yeah, I came back, and so I came back. The move was over, so problem solved. I wasn't gonna move. No, then I became stressed out because I thought my life was over. My mental health took a deeper dive. It got to the point where even I was in and out of the mental health ward here at the hospital in town a couple times. Yeah, and to make matters worse, that was around the same time that I got hired here at the center. So already a stressful situation. I just threw more stress on. And now now I'm in a much better spot right now because I am in therapy. I'm back on some meds, and it's funny that Linda talked about that stop method because I use that a lot just to stay distressed and try to stay mindful and in the moment. So yeah, and in therapy, we're working on I'm working a lot of coping skills, because what I found out is that I just lacked coping skills when I come up against stressful situations. And that's what put me in such a weird situation last summer. So that's a little bit of my story, and I hope that this story can, I don't know, I hope it can be of use to somebody, and you can't let stuff stress you out. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Kyle, for sharing. Please, if you have any questions for Kyle or for Linda, please feel free to enter them either into the Mentimeter chat or in the Zoom chat. Kyle, it's really interesting hearing your story, because I guess I didn't realize like how close that was to your employment when you started here at the center.
Oh yeah, it was like back to back. I came back to North Dakota in shambles in August, and then I was hired in October. So it was a stressful situation on top of stressful situation. Yeah. It was a crazy couple months for me.
So would you be willing to share like what are some of your coping mechanisms that you've learned about? You talked about stop.
And honestly, because even to this day, I sometimes there's a lot of regrets that I feel about not moving, because I thought, that was my shot. But I felt like that was my shot, and I was gonna be famous, but now this is where I'm at, and you just gotta live in the moment and make the best out of what situation you find yourself in. And the most that I can do is just get my head on straight, so if I ever try to take a leap that big again, mentally I'm gonna be prepared for it.
That's some great advice. Thank you. Steve just chimed in. Thanks, Kyle. I've been there, different circumstances many years ago, but I get it. I like what you had to say about coping skills. Yeah, it seems like it kind of always boils down to coping skills. And
yeah, you just gotta learn how to deal.
Yeah.
It's a bumpy ride, and the better you can handle it, the better off you are.
Exactly. And it's so unfortunate that the easy copes, we just talked about this at a training that we did yesterday. The easy copes are sweeten, salty foods, fatty foods, drugs and alcohol. Sorry, I got muted there. And also, I believe sex, according to Dr. Bruce Perry's work. So it takes time and practice to get yourself in that healthy situation where these positive coping skills are long lasting. So Linda and Kyle, do you have any words of advice before we kind of wrap up here? We've got some really great content in the chat. I really appreciate you guys all weighing in here.
I'm going to Linda, because I'm still figuring it out myself. So if anything, I'm going to take notes, and if she has any advice.
Oh yeah, I guess I have a couple things, and this is how I sort of, when I do the tour training, I finish this up is like, first of all, is give yourself grace. We all do the best we can with what we have in the moment, and being hard on ourselves really adds to our stress. So be kind to yourself is number one. Give yourself grace. Number two is, and it's the old cliche, but like the cliche about if when the air mask dropped down in the airplane, you put yours on first, right? And so you have to take care of yourself. And it's hard, especially for people, I think, who work in human services and roles where we support other people and work with other people, that we are naturally or get taught to be the sort of people who put everybody else's needs first. And walking that back is really hard to do, but if you have to write it in your calendar, like I'm going to spend 15 minutes on myself today doing this, then do that. There was a training that, and it doesn't have to be a big thing, but when we do this training with, the people who are in our self-directed program, sometimes they're parents of people with disabilities who, are paid, through self-directed programs. And, sometimes they're the only caregiver. And so they work basically 24 hours a day. And for this one, it was a mom, that on a really rough day that she's not finding any time for herself, that, you know, if she had a chance to brush her teeth, she counts it as a win. And that seems really, really like, oh my gosh. But for her, that was like her anchor point, like whatever your anchor point is, like, if I can get this done today, like I did something to take care of myself. And it seems like a really trivial thing, but for her, that's the thing that worked for her, to think about that. And I'm not, you know, trivializing her experience at all. She shared this story, but it's just that we all have to pick that anchor thing, that we're going to do this every day, no matter what. And whatever that is, this is the one thing we're going to do for ourselves every day. And hopefully we can build on that and do more. But you have one thing that you do every day to take care of yourself. And hopefully, you're already finding ways to do that. It's just so important. And then the other thing is, what else I was going to say? I guess it doesn't matter, but those are two things, like be kind to yourself and, give yourself grace, and find an anchor point that you can every day do at least one thing for yourself, however much time you have to do it. So.
That is fabulous advice, and being kind to yourself is easier said than done.
Absolutely, without question.
Once you can get that pendulum to swing, it is life-changing.
And I will just sort of piggyback a little bit on what Kyle says is, therapy's great. Do it. Everybody should do it. Whether you think you need it or not, you probably need it. Do it. So it's a good thing. So.
And it's nice that therapy, I guess one positive thing that came from the pandemic was virtual therapy or telehealth. I've never stepped foot in my therapist's office until I was trying to get tested for ADHD, and that was the first time that I had ever seen her in person. But I mean, I absolutely love teletherapy because, like, I'm a perfectionist and it's hard for me to cry in front of people. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna turn off my camera for a hot second, lose it, and then turn it back on. So it's much more accessible these days. Oh, thank you, Joy, for putting that in the chat. A cool virtual walking challenge is the Conquer challenges. These things do cost money, but I remember for a while there, we were all really obsessed with completing these because you get a cool medal at the end of it and they're absolutely beautiful. And it was a big motivator too. And just walking outside, it kind of gives you like a virtual path that you're walking along. So say that you want to walk along, like, I don't know, like a river in Paris, like they might have one that's themed like that. And then it'll show you like actual pictures along your walk. And then it's just a really great motivator too, because you're also doing this with people all around the world. So, oh, and great paint by numbers kits. I'm obsessed with those. I use Sandbox, the app on my phone, because I'm too lazy to get supplies out, but it's basically the same concept. So, well, thank you, everybody. These are fabulous resources that you've all put in the chat. We will include these in that resource link or in the resource document that we send out at the end of the series or at the end of the session. Please take a moment to do our survey. These surveys are really, really important, not only just for us to know how we did this session, but also for our funders. They like to know that they funded a decent project, and by getting the results from you guys, helps with that, even if it's negative. Tell us what we're doing wrong so we can improve, because we definitely comb through these. I mean, it's not like you had to say only positive things. That's not the case. So we do have one last session on April 12th. It's actually a makeup session from our second whole person wellness that was rescheduled the second week that we were doing this. So we hope to see you at our very last session. And thank you so much, Linda and Kyle, for presenting today, and everybody for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of the day or week.